In February 2025, archaeologists in Pompeii brushed away centuries of volcanic debris to reveal something extraordinary. On 3 walls of an ancient banquet hall, nearly life-size figures emerged from the darkness. These weren't just decorative paintings. They were forbidden images, depictions of secret rituals that the Roman state had tried to erase from history nearly 2,000 years ago. The cult of Dionysus operated in shadows. Initiates gathered in secret, bound by oaths never to speak of what occurred. To reveal their mysteries meant death, sometimes at Roman hands. In 1806 BCE, the Roman Senate launched a brutal crackdown. Thousands were executed. Meeting places were destroyed. The cult's secrets were meant to die with its followers. But Vesuvius had other plans. When the volcano erupted in 79 CE, it buried one wealthy household's most dangerous secret under 20 feet of ash, and preserved it for eternity. To understand what these frescoes mean, we need to step back into a Rome most people never learn about. A Rome of underground religions and secret initiations. Mystery cults were unlike anything in official Roman religion. While public worship was transactional, sacrifice for favor, these cults offered something far more personal. They promised transformation. At their center was Dionysus, called Bacchus by the Romans, god of wine and ecstasy, but also god of death and rebirth. His followers believed that through sacred ritual, they could share in his resurrection. The initiation rituals were held in absolute secrecy. Before the crackdown, the Bacchanalia occurred only twice yearly, on March 16th and 17th, and were attended exclusively by women. Later, men were admitted to the ceremonies, and celebrations expanded to 5 gatherings each month. The cult was growing, and the Senate was watching. In 1806 BCE, the Roman Senate passed the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, a decree restricting Dionysian gatherings to a handful of attendees who required special licenses to worship. What followed was a religious purge. Many practitioners were killed or imprisoned. Places of worship were demolished. The cult's meeting spaces were razed to the ground. Roman authorities accused the cult of drunkenness, sexual license, and violence. But modern historians question whether these charges were accurate or simply propaganda to justify persecution. The truth is, we've never really known what happened in these rituals. As archaeologist Sophie Hay explains, these were mystery cults, so what they actually did has remained a mystery even in ancient written sources. Until now. Until volcanic ash preserved what participants were sworn to conceal. Until the House of Thiasus gave up its secrets. The newly discovered fresco in the House of Thiasus features nearly life-size figures covering 3 walls of a spacious banquet room. They depict a continuous procession of Dionysian ritual. Experts have compared this discovery to the famous Villa of the Mysteries frescoes, calling it one of the most important finds in over a century of Pompeian archaeology. The Villa of the Mysteries was excavated between 1909 and 1910, and its Dionysian frescoes have captivated scholars ever since. But they show only fragments of the ritual. These new paintings reveal much more. The scene depicts maenads, the god's ecstatic female followers, in dual roles. Some appear as graceful dancers. Others carry slaughtered kid goats and animal entrails, portraying the cult's fiercer aspects. Beside the maenads, satyrs played double flutes. The music would have set the pace for ritual dances that ancient sources describe as wild, ecstatic, and transformative. This mix of beauty and violence was central to Dionysian worship. The god himself embodied contradictions: joy and terror, civilization and wilderness, life and death. At the center of the fresco stands a woman being initiated into the mysteries. She represents the promise at the cult's heart, that through these rites, followers could share in the god's own death and resurrection. This is what terrified Rome. Not simply drunken parties, as the propaganda suggested, but a competing vision of salvation, one that operated outside state control and official religion. The state religion was civic duty. You sacrificed to the gods so Rome would prosper, but mystery cults offered personal redemption, an afterlife for the individual soul, not just glory for the empire. The House of Thiasus frescoes were painted approximately a century before Vesuvius erupted. That means they were created long after the Senate's crackdown. Yet the cult clearly continued in secret. This wealthy Pompeian family risked everything to commission these images. In a private dining room surrounded by friends they trusted, they celebrated what the state had forbidden. The banquet hall setting is significant. Dionysian rituals centered on wine, not as simple intoxication, but as a sacred substance that could induce communion with the divine. Guests reclining here would have drunk wine while contemplating these images, perhaps reenacting elements of initiation. The room itself became a sacred space. Then came August 24, 79 CE. Vesuvius awakened. Within hours, pyroclastic flows buried Pompeii under layers of superheated ash that would preserve it for nearly 2 millennia. The same catastrophe that killed thousands also created an accidental time capsule. Foods, fabrics, buildings, and paintings survived in conditions that would have destroyed them anywhere else. The frescoes survived because the ash sealed them from air and moisture. Colors that would have faded over centuries remained vivid. Secrets meant to die with their keepers endured. Pompeii's rediscovery began in 1748, when workmen digging a foundation struck ancient walls. Since then, excavation has continued intermittently, each decade revealing new wonders. But much of the city remains unexcavated. Approximately 1/3 lies still buried, waiting. Each new dig risks destroying what it uncovers, unless techniques have advanced sufficiently. Modern archaeology proceeds carefully. Ground-penetrating radar maps what lies beneath. Conservation teams stand ready the moment paintings emerge into sunlight. Nothing is rushed. The House of Thiasus excavation exemplifies this careful approach. Teams documented every centimeter as they cleared ash that had protected these images for 19 centuries. What they found rewrites our understanding of Dionysian worship. Not vague hints from hostile sources, but visual evidence painted by believers for believers. Consider what these paintings tell us. The maenads carrying animal remains suggest ritual sacrifice was real, but perhaps more symbolic than the lurid Roman accounts claimed. The centrality of the female initiate confirms that women held important roles in these mysteries, at a time when Roman public religion was dominated by male priests. The satyrs and their music suggest that altered states were achieved through sound and movement, not simply wine. Drumming, dancing, and flutes could produce trance-like experiences. Most significantly, the promise of death and rebirth, sharing in Dionysus's own story, appears front and center. This was a religion of hope in an age when many believed death was simply the end. Scholars still debate interpretation. Were these paintings literal depictions of rituals, or symbolic imagery understood only by initiates? We may never know completely. As Sophie Hay observed to Smithsonian Magazine, these were mystery cults, so what they did remains mysterious, even in ancient written sources. The paintings offer clues, not complete answers. But clues are more than we had before. For centuries, our only information came from sources hostile to the cult, Roman officials who had every reason to exaggerate and distort. Now we have images created by practitioners themselves. Not accusations, but celebrations. Not propaganda, but devotion. The cult speaks in its own voice, after 2,000 years of silence. This discovery also illuminates how minority religions survived Roman persecution. By moving into private homes, keeping small numbers, and hiding in plain sight. The wealthy had options the poor did not. A grand dining room with locked doors could become a temple. Trusted dinner guests could become fellow initiates. Servants could be bound to secrecy. This pattern would repeat throughout Roman history. When Christianity was persecuted, believers gathered in homes and catacombs. When Christianity became official, pagan practices went underground. The Dionysian Mysteries eventually faded, absorbed into other traditions, or simply dying out as the Roman world transformed. But echoes persist in unexpected places. Some scholars see parallels between Dionysian resurrection myths and later Christian theology. Others trace mystery cult influences into medieval mysticism. The connections remain debated. What's certain is that humans have always sought experiences beyond the everyday. Rituals that promise transformation. Communities that share secrets. Connection to something larger than individual life. The House of Thiasus frescoes are now accessible to visitors as part of ongoing Pompeii excavations. Modern protective structures allow viewing while preserving these fragile paintings. Seeing them in person offers something photographs cannot capture. The scale, nearly life-size figures surrounding you on three sides. The colors, still vivid after millennia. The intimacy of the space. Standing in that room, you're not in a museum. You're in someone's home, a home where people gathered to practice what their government had forbidden, where they risked everything for faith. If you're planning a visit to Pompeii, the House of Thiasus should be on your itinerary. Check the official Pompeii Archaeological Park website for current access information and guided tour options. Before you go, study the Villa of the Mysteries frescoes online. They've been photographed extensively and provide essential context for understanding the new discovery. Compare the two sites to see how Dionysian imagery evolved over time. Notice the similarities in poses, symbols, and colors, and the differences that reveal changing beliefs. Think about what this story reveals about religious persecution. Rome's attempts to destroy the Dionysian cult failed. Believers simply adapted, moved into private spaces, and continued. Consider how secrets can be preserved across millennia. These initiates could never have imagined that volcanic ash would make their hidden rituals visible to billions of future people. The Pompeii discovery reminds us that archaeology is ongoing. Beneath cities around the Mediterranean, countless treasures remain buried. Each year brings new revelations from the ancient world. Follow the Pompeii Archaeological Park on social media for announcements of new discoveries. The House of Thiasus find was announced through official channels before major media coverage. Support archaeological preservation efforts. Organizations like the World Monuments Fund work to protect sites like Pompeii from decay, climate change, and tourist damage. Use this story as a lens to examine how governments treat religious minorities. The Roman crackdown on Dionysian worship offers uncomfortable parallels with both ancient and modern persecution. 2,000 years ago, initiates entered a Pompeian banquet hall. They reclined on couches, drank sacred wine, and contemplated images of their forbidden god. They believed they would share in his resurrection. They could not have known that Vesuvius would preserve their secret. That ash would protect what they dared not speak of. That time itself would become their witness. The Dionysian Mysteries promise transformation through ritual. In a way, that transformation has occurred, not for the initiates, but for our understanding of them. What was hidden is now revealed. What was silenced now speaks. And a secret kept for 2 millennia finally sees the light of the modern sun. That's all for today's episode. If you found this illuminating, share it with someone who loves ancient history, or who keeps their own secrets well.